Hello, everyone, and welcome to Asian Viewpoints with Mary Sitt. Our guest today is an award-winning director and writer. Christine Swanson is from Detroit and has directed critically acclaimed films and TV series, including the movie Love Under New Management, The Mickey Howard Story, Chicago PD, FBI, and the indie romance films All About You and a sequel, All About Us. Her latest movie she wrote and directed is Albany Road, starring Renee Elise Goldsberry and Lynn Whitfield. Thank you so much for being with us, Christine.
Thank you for having me.
So, how did you get into filmmaking? Because that is a hard industry to break into.
Sure. I was a freshman at the University of Notre Dame and my major was finance, only because I thought I probably could get a job maybe in the finance. Had no love or interest for it whatsoever. It was just a logical choice. And it just so happened that Spike Lee visited the campus. Uh,
Wow.
and I got to hear him speak. And I'm a kid from inner city Detroit, first gen to go to college. And listening to Spike Lee, I was like, people make movies for a living? Like, that's a job that I can do? And after that, I was like just bitten by the bug. And I'm like, that's what I'm going to do.
Christine, when you direct actors, do you sort of like give them detailed instructions of what you want to see, or do you give them sort of broad, instructions and sort of like let them go for it and sort of add
Sure,
a little
sure.
bit? How do you do it?
My job as a director is to make sure that the actors are safe. So if they
Okay.
feel safe, anything is possible in terms of their performances and their thought processes and their
And when
create.
you say safe, Christine, you're talking about emotionally safe,
Yes, and
right?
creatively safe.
And creatively safe. Okay.
Like they can try things.
Okay.
They know that I see them, and they also
Mhm.
know that I see like them trying something, and then I can push them like, "Hey, let's explore that a little bit
Mhm.
more because I see you doing something, and I think we need to go in that direction."
Christine, you have a production company called Faith Filmworks. Explain the name and the role faith plays in your work.
Well, it's funny when my husband Michael Swanson is a producer, and he's actually a studio executive at NBC Universal. So we kind of grew up in this business together. And so almost 30 years ago, when we started our
Wow.
production company, we were like, we don't know what we're
You
doing.
don't look that old. You started the company 30 years ago?
We did.
Okay. Okay.
And we were just like, I know a little bit and you know a little bit, but really what we're about to jump into is going to require an enormous amount of faith that I don't think that we have enough of today, but I believe it can grow and build on. So we like the name Faith Filmworks because faith works. And personally, it's for me, it's not. I have an enormous amount of faith and confidence in myself, and yet, having been worked in this industry for north of 30 years, I can assure you that is not enough. In fact, you're just scratching the surface if you have belief in yourself. For me, the faith part comes in because so much of it is a belief outside of myself.
Mhm.
And I don't do what I do without external help from God. And like I'm unabashed in my belief in that because my life is a testimony to what's possible when you have belief in God and God directs your path.
Christine, you grew up in Detroit. Your
Mhm.
father is Black, your mother's Korean. Tell
Mhm.
me how that dual ethnicity influenced you, especially the Korean side.
Sure. So my dad, who was in the military, traveled all over the country. So I actually lived in Korea until I was 6 years old.
Oh,
So my first language was Korean, and for all intents and purposes, I thought I was a Korean person
uh-huh.
only. Only.
Uh-huh.
Because I was raised by my Korean grandmother and her sister, and just all the Korean aunts and uncles. So my early doctrination in my brain is really Korean. Like they say, the first 7 years of your life, your brain is formed.
Hmm.
So if I were to write a memoir about my life, I would call it maybe 6 years Korean.
Uh-huh. I love
And
that.
then we moved to the States when I was 6, and I lived on a military base, and I started to realize, like, I'm not in Kansas anymore. And then 2 years after that, my parents actually ended up divorcing, and my
Mm,
father retired from the military, and he ended up raising us. So he moved us to Detroit. That's how I ended up in Detroit, because that was his hometown. And then once I
okay.
landed in Detroit, I had this keen realization that, oh my gosh, I'm Black.
Christine, today, does that Korean influence from those first 6 years influence your work?
I think it's interesting because, like, the movies I tell are primarily uh Black stories, and,
Hmm.
and there's a specific reason for that, because I grew up in Detroit, being immersed into this beautiful culture, and then I would go to movies and I would watch Black images on screen, and I would always feel a disconnect because I'm like, I don't really connect with the kind of images on screen, and the images of the people that I'm around. And I just thought, what is that disconnect? And honestly, that disconnect is Black people not telling their own stories from their own experiences and their own points of views. And so that's what I was like, I want to do something about that one day. And that's why my stories lean in that way.
Let's talk about Albany Road. Tell me what the story is about.
So the story is about two intergenerational women who um, have a past, and they meet up at an airport where they're forced to share the last rental car in the airport because of a snowstorm. And in this road trip journey, we start to understand, like, these women hate each other, but we start to understand the history behind how they got to this place. And as the movie progresses, um, the story shows how these women are really interconnected, and they are really the engine that for each other that begins a healing process.
Christine, what do you look at when you look at film material? What excites you and, go, oh, I have to tell this story on film?
Yeah, I'm always excited about a character who is compromised in
Mhm.
ways that they can't help.
Okay.
And then I love to see, how are they going to figure this out? So, because sometimes it's the exploration of their own internal courage.
Mhm.
It's the understanding of their own limitations. It's the coming to terms with a humility that they did not know they needed. So all those specific character traits are things that I'm exploring within myself.
Mhm.
And typically, on a universal level, so are most people. So we always want to follow that hero on a journey, because we
Mhm.
can identify with that character, because we are all on our own hero's journey.
Christine, do you view filmmaking as a calling?
You know, yes and no. Only because I'm in an industry that often many people think of themselves as so self-important. And I'm kind of like, yeah, no. I do see it as an opportunity to, it's missional, maybe.
Mhm.
Um, I would reserve that kind of talk in terms of calling as like more like as a wife, as a mother, as a humanitarian, as a friend, like filmmaking, it's a job with missional components. Every time you make a film, it's like I have moved a mountain with so many people, including my cast, my crew, producers, and the satisfaction that you get on the other side of that is immense. But to get there, the work is incredibly hard. So like to make a movie is is hard, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
to make a good movie is like going into warfare, right?
Wow.
And to make a great movie is nothing short of a miracle. I've been wired for that since I was a little girl in Korea, you know? I've been wired for multiple challenges
And what was it about being a little girl in Korea that that you knew you were wired for this?
One of the things I remember distinctly, when I was in Korea, I'm 4 or 5 years old, and um, I used to just wander in the streets of Korea, and people did not know where I was. I distinctly remember that I was kind of just fearless, and it's obviously it was safe at the time, but
Right, right.
I just maneuvered in the midst of chaos. Like, the busy streets and street vendors and all this movement. And
Uh-huh.
I'm this fearless little kid wandering. I was just a fearless little girl who went from point A to point B because she had a desire to do so, and nothing stopped her. Nothing stopped her. So that started in Korea because that's my distinct memory of maneuvering in that way. So there's a lot of confidence that was built up in my little village by like I just remember my grandmother just pouring so much love and attention into my life that she was a life force that planted seeds early on. And when people plant seeds of love and concern and boundless love into the heart of a child, anything is possible. So I had that anything is possible drive and know-how and mentality as an infant because of my Korean relatives and my Korean uncles and aunts who just loved on me. And then the same was true for when I moved to Detroit because my mother didn't raise me once I got to Detroit. It was my Black grandmother and her
Mm,
sister. So I got passed by or passed down from my Korean grandmother and her sister
mhm.
to my Black grandmother and her sister. So
Um,
I was raised by just wise ancestors who
mhm.
who's who had already raised their children,
Yeah.
but they sacrificed to pour into my life. So I'm just a blessed mixture of two cultures
Mhm.
that are very dissimilar, but the love is similar. So, and I'm a product of that.
That's great. Well, Christine, thank you so much for sharing your story. It sounds like that would be a great next movie.
I'm
Somewhere down the
working on
line.
it.
Okay.
It may be a limited series. There's a lot of
Okay.
storytelling there.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much as well, Mary.
That's all for this edition of Asian Viewpoints. If you enjoyed this interview, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to this channel so you'll never miss an episode. I'm Mary Sitt. I'll see you again in the next video.